How is China doing what they're doing, influencing the United States for the benefit of communist China and not the benefit of you? China's interest, U.S. interest. China's interest, U.S. interest. Those are not the same thing. How is China doing what they're doing? I wrote out a little thing for me. I do my own little diagrams for myself. So China has decided that they were going to work on parallel paths. China needs to influence people to do things in the United States that are not in the United States' interest or China's interest. So they take a parallel path. Path one is they influence Wall Street and business leaders. What exactly is Wall Street? Wall Street obviously is where the New York Stock Exchange is. So I hate when people say like they're trying to influence Wall Street. Like what specifically does that mean? They're not on Wall Street like selling Sabret hot dogs or something like that. Remember that for you New Yorkers? But you know exactly what I'm talking about if you grew up in the 80s in New York, right? That's not what they're talking about. They're talking about big business and big corporations that are listed on the New York Stock Exchange, which is down on Wall Street. How would China influence those people and why would those companies do things not in the interest in the United States? Because, ladies and gentlemen, a lot of those companies, whether on Wall Street or in Silicon Valley out in California, a lot of those companies have a significant business interest in China as well. It's one of these, I've been using this all week. Joe, you've heard it a few times now, but it's one of these, like, imagine the Chinese Communist Party like the local mob we had to deal with growing up in New York City. What the local mob does is, you know, if you work in a bagel store or a deli or whatever, the local mob soldier comes in, whatever his title is, whatever, and he kind of says, hey, can I talk to the owner? The owner knows who he is, obviously, and comes out and says, hey, buddy, how's it going? Guy says, listen, who are you using for your private sanitation when you throw your garbage at it? Because, you know, New York Sanitation Department doesn't pick up commercial garbage. They pick up private garbage, right? Residential garbage and stuff. So they say, yeah, we're using Joey Bag of Donuts sanitation. Guy says, I got a better idea. What are you paying for that? We're paying a couple $100 a month. I've got a better company. I've got Mr. Tony Bag of Donuts Sanitation, and I can do a better deal for $500 a month. You're like, Joe's like, I'm confused. I'm paying $200 a month for Joey Bag of Donuts Sanitation, and you're telling me you have a better deal for me with Mr. Tony Bag of Donuts Sanitation at $500 a month. It's a better deal. And wink and a nod, it'd be a real shame if you don't take the deal. Your place wouldn't, you know, if it burned down, it'd be awful. Can we all agree? Then you'd need a whole lot of sanitation to clean out the burnt place in the woods. And the owner gets it pretty quickly. Yeah. Joe's like, yeah, even I get it. Sounds like a great deal. And the owner's like, okay. Oh, I get it. Be a real shame if we beat up people coming out of your place every day too, right? What a terrible shame. Sounds like a great deal. Thanks. Where do I sign? That's kind of what the Chinese Communist Party does to big business titans on Wall Street, places like the NBA and tech companies in Silicon Valley who want to get access to 1 billion Chinese consumers. Hey, be a real shame if we shut you off from our 1 billion Chinese consumers you were making a whole lot of money on, wouldn't it? Be a real shame if your business burned down financially because we didn't let you bring your movies into China, right? China, which has become a significant source of income for Hollywood. So the influence operation is clear as day. It's not hard to understand. It's the wink and a nod. Be a real shame, fill in the blank. Be a real shame if you Hollywood actors and Hollywood studios who don't seem to have any problem with the Chinese imprisoning Uyghurs, Muslims, imprisoning political enemies in gulags. Be a real shame if you spoke out about that and your movie didn't show in China. And of course, because they're weak, they're like, oh yeah, would be a real shame, wouldn't it? I better delete that tweet from remember the Houston Rockets guy, the executive with the Houston Rockets who dared to criticize China? Next thing you know, you had these phonies, fraud. Remember LeBron James, Joe? Biggest phony ever. Someone once told me, don't attack LeBron James. People love him. My hits file, if you get what I mean to give, hits with an S in the beginning, is 0 with LeBron James and sports figures. I give absolutely 0 hits at all. Everybody listen clear. Oh my gosh, if you do, they'll attack you. I don't care. Not at all. 0. LeBron James was like, you know, people who speak out about China, you've got to understand. Like, you better not do that. because other people have interest now. Oh, okay. Thanks, LeBron. Real freedom rights. Isn't he one of these Black Lives Matter guys too, fighting for what? Freedom and social justice? Just not in China where they put people in gulags. I have zero patience for these people. You get the Tony Bag of Donuts approach China does now? They do that to the NBA. Be a real shame if you criticized us in a tweet and we pulled your team out of China. Big market for basketball in China. Be a real shame, wouldn't it? Tech companies in Silicon Valley to Facebook and YouTube and others. Be a real shame if you didn't comply with our censorship algorithms in China. Be a real shame if we pulled you out of those billion people and actually gave the billion people market in China to a competitor. Be a real shame, wouldn't it? You go to big companies that are listed on whether it be the NASDAQ or the New York Stock Exchange, the Dow, the S&P. You go to big companies. Hey, be a real shame if your cars weren't allowed to be sold in China, right? It would be a terrible shame if we then gave that market to your competitor, right? So that's path one. I have to lay this out because we get to Glenn Greenwald's piece. When he talks about Wall Street, this is what he's talking about, the real shame approach. Can we call it that, Joe? Does that make sense? The real shame approach. Yeah. He's talking about big companies and tech companies where they say, be a real shame if we pulled you out of China, banned you from doing business here, and gave the business to your competitor. Real shame. So that's one track where the Chinese Communist Party, the real shame approach, tries to influence big business and Wall Street. And those Wall Street, in turn, and big business folks that contribute to politicians and elsewhere and other causes, then talk to those politicians on their behalf. Hey, politician, Joey Bag of Donuts. Listen, I'm a big executive at big company X, on Wall Street, listed on the stock exchange. We've given you a lot of campaign donations. It's probably good you vote for this policy. Yeah, but the policy will screw over U.S. citizens in the favor of China. Hey, be a real shame if we stop those campaign donations. You see how the real shame cascade happens? The cascade downhill of real shames? China to Wall Street. Real shame if we pulled your business out of China. Wall Street to politicians. Be a real shame if we stop our campaign donations.
You just heard Dan Bongino.